I got the arcade blues, I got the arcade blues, I got the arcade blues so bad. I got the arcade blues, I got the arcade blues, that's trouble I've never had. That's trouble I've never had. These silk dress women, that's all things always had. These silk dress women, make a married man feel bad. Make a married man feel bad. If you got a good woman, I'd advise you to leave her at home. Them arcade boys won't let a good woman alone. Won't let a good woman alone. If you got a good woman, don't you ever bring her into town. 'Cause a red-headed woman is a red-headed woman, make a gray rabbit love a hound. Make a gray rabbit love a hound. Like a great big Cadillac, it'll carry you over to the graveyard, boys, and man won't bring you back. That will not bring you back. Don't lay my head upon some railroad track. It'll carry me away, but it will not bring me back. It will not bring me back.
Yippee-ki-yay. All right, hey. This is happening, friends. Getting this session started. And looks like it's happening. Yeah, knock on wood. Looks like it's happening without a hitch, technically speaking, today. On time, even. What could possibly go wrong in this live without a net stream? Good to see y'all again and be back at you and to do a live session. I know a lot of you are pretty happy to hear we're going live again like the olden days. And it's always fun to do so. Can't do it as much these days as got a lot of other stuff on the schedule, but it's fun when we get a chance to do so. If you're watching this in real time, tomorrow I do have a live lesson scheduled that might have to get moved around time-wise into Thursday or later on Wednesday, or I might end up having to pre-record it. I'm going to get that lesson to you in the next day or so. Hopefully live. We'll see what happens. Either way, I'll get it into your sphere. So I think everything's up and running. Might want to hear from some of you on the chat. So if you can see your chat button. If you don't see your chat button right away, you might need to refresh your screen. Because I usually just activate that right before the stream starts. So, a little technical house cleaning in the beginning. Okay. Pulling up some questions here. I do have Tony in the chat, so it looks like we're alive and kicking. Oh, you know, it's weird. I think I might need to. I think I know why I'm not seeing your chats. Let's see. I might need to log in as a proper administrator here. Nope. That's not it. Well, it was almost a perfect start, my friends. Let's try this guy. But still don't see those messages, so I'll keep working on that. Let's give you some more musical interludes here for a second. I'll make sure I get the chat set up correctly, and then we'll get down to business. Let's see here. Oh, there we are. I think I got it figured out, my friends. No musical interlude required. All right. Brother Bill is out there, and he says, volume up, please. Thank you, Brother Bill. Man, I know I've said this in like the last 4 or 5 streams and pre-recorded videos, but this software updated, and now it turns my mic down upon hitting record. No matter what the settings are, it turns my mic down, and I usually don't notice it, so thank you, Bill. Now you should be able to hear me, and I'll try to speak up a little bit, even though that's not my forte. Good to hear from some of the irregulars. Tony, UK lefty Tony, also let me know I was quiet. I think I'm back in action now on the volume. And I heard from Bor. We jumped on the call, and he was telling me that he's on the road and can't make it, but that there's a bit of a heat wave hitting 90 degrees Fahrenheit or so out there in the UK. Tony's saying here, yes, indeed, 37 Celsius, 98 Fahrenheit. Never been this hot before. And tomatoes are just starting to turn red, so all good in the greenhouse. Great to have a live session today. Tony, that's what I always say around here. And, not to one-up everybody, our pals over in Merry England, but we've had about a month's worth of almost every day, somewhere between 95 and 104 Fahrenheit with heat indexes above that. So not very pleasant at all. Even here, we usually get that a few weeks out of the year. We always look forward to running away during the heat wave of the season. But this year is one of those nonstop things. It sounds like it's hitting our pals out in the UK as well. So sorry to hear that. But what I always say in this kind of weather is it's terrible for humans, but it's wonderful for plants. So somebody's always winning. And yeah, your tomatoes do not even need a greenhouse at this point, my friend. We heard from Beebs. Good to hear from Beebs. I got a question from Beebs we'll get to. He also couldn't hear me. It sounds like I'm back in action, though. That's a good thing about the live chat is y'all can let me know when my mic's off, and then I don't have to re-record all these things. And, okay, everybody says they can hear me now. Good deal. Yeah, so as I mentioned, we did hear from Curbs. Very, Kirby's on the road and also in the heat wave out there. So everybody stay hydrated. Stay in the shade. The shade is your friend. Cover your dermal layer and don't get too much direct exposure if you're not used to it. Those of you up there in the UK probably have similar heritage to me. About 50% of my family heritage is from England. The rest is mostly from Sicily, so I have a weird combination going on. But my skin is mostly a UK skin, so I can give you that bit of advice. Get a little sun, but be cautious and stay cool. All right. Well, one good way that Doc Watson used to talk about when people would ask him about how did he get so good at guitar and what are some strategies for mastering an instrument, basically. He always talked about growing up in North Carolina. He said the best thing to do is in the summertime when the weather gets hot, you plant yourself underneath the shade of a big pine tree with a big glass of iced tea, and you just stay there with your guitar. That was his advice for becoming a master guitar player. And although there's probably some ingredients he left out of that recipe, I cannot agree with him more that there's nothing nicer than getting under a nice shade tree. And if you're in a hot place with pine trees, try it out. I always find the coolest spot around here in the summertime is if you can find a good big pine tree with a nice bed of pine straw underneath. It's comfortable and somehow just the most ventilated area you can find around here. And of course, Beeb's going to rub it in that Oregon today is a mellow 79 degrees. Now that's more like it. That's how it's supposed to be, right? We're supposed to be sweltering in the Midwest. Chill in Oregon. The UK, though, has gone off script and is kind of on fire. Okay. Well, this is fun. It's good to chat with you all again. I'll still, like I told you recently, I'll still try to do this once or twice a month in some fashion. And, ought to be pretty good times. Coming up in the near future, I might be slowing down on the pre-recorded weekly stuff. But like I said, I'll keep touching base and coming in at least on these live things, and we'll still have a weekly touch base session of some sort, whether it's email, newsletter, some sort of banjo content will come your way every week, and then once or twice a month we'll do a live session for the foreseeable future. And a lot of other interesting things coming down the road while we're chatting, getting started here. For those of you here in real time, got some good, I guess I'll leave some of them. I'll keep most of the details under wraps, lest I get everybody excited too early, but got some cool stuff I'm developing here for the channel and for the site. Hey, Renee from up in the UP. Oh, that's good to know. And hopefully we got you back on your account this morning, Renee. I sent you a message, so you must be up and running if we're in here, so cool. And then Brother Bill says, if music be the food of love, play on. I love a good Shakespeare quote, and that's probably a good inspiration to get moving here. So keep your chats coming. Keep the stuff coming. I'll keep an eye on it, and I'm going to start with some questions that are already in the hopper. I told you I got one from Beebs already, and Beebs was asking about a lighter banjo, as he's having some challenges with some health setbacks, and we hope you rise up, power through this, Beebs. We're all rooting for you, so it's good to hear from you, and I'm glad to hear you're still dedicated to picking that banjo up, even though it's more and more of a challenge for you. But the question was just that, is there a light? What's the lightest workable banjo you know of? It's getting hard to hold it more than 5 minutes. You don't want to give up. So otherwise, what are some options like shortening the strap or propping it on something? That was my first idea when I heard your question, Beeps, was propping that thing up on some pillows or something like that. Probably is not a bad idea. Now the strap itself, if it's basic strap protocols, if you got it set up with the anchor points here in the right spot, you can usually balance it where it's kind of already up in position. So if you've got your strap in a good spot, obviously this one's going to be back on the end pin usually, but get this one about right here, somewhere on this side of the pot. Got a good balance. So yeah, if I shorten the strap, it does tend to take the load off of certain parts of the body. So I think if you raise that up, it might be generally easier. So if you tighten that strap, I'm not sure though, but it's worth a try. Light banjos. I would say the lightest banjo I know of that sounds really good is the banjo that I learned to play on, and the banjo that I played for about 20 years before it met its horrible fate, and I ended up starting to buy some Brooks banjos. And it was a kit that my father had put together, kind of inspired by our neighbor who was a bluegrass banjo player. And I forget the company at the time, but now those kits are sold by Saga, the company Saga, S-A-G-A, and they make musical instrument kits, and one of them is this banjo kit, 5-string banjo, and has an aluminum pot. So the entire pot is aluminum. Right away, that lowers the weight of the instrument dramatically. It also had at the time, and I imagine these days, admittedly a pretty cheap wood for the neck, which also made it lighter because it wasn't as hard and dense of a wood as walnut, maple, your common tone woods. It also had the Saga, and still does. I've seen these things still in production, and they're basically the same thing that I learned on and played on for years. They also had no tone ring in them. They just kind of have a built-in kind of replacement for the tone ring system built into the pot. It's kind of molded into the aluminum structure. Having no tone ring drops a little more weight off of there. And basically, so a lot of what will take the weight off is your tone ring, the hard tone woods. It's a lot of the stuff that makes a banjo sound really good will make it heavy. But like I said, those Sagas can really sound good. Now, I know you're not in the position right now where you're thinking, cool, let me start a project in the wood shop and make a banjo from a kit. But I'm guessing you could probably find some already assembled for sale on some secondhand marketplaces. Would probably be the best bet. So something like Banjo Hangout or Reverb.com would probably be your best bet. And while we're sitting here talking about it, I might just see what happens if I said Saga 5-string banjo for sale. Let's see. Yeah, I see one on reverb, and this one's from the 70s, so this would be like the one I learned on. Oh, that's a bluegrass one, and they want $1,400. That is a different kind of Saga. The one I'm talking about is very inexpensive. I don't know what they are these days, but probably in the, just a few $100s. So it's looking like the Saga brand has a lot. Oh, here we go. This one's $570 for a bluegrass one. So they do still exist out there. Yeah, so if you did a search like that, you would probably want to also throw in backless banjo, something along those lines. And then Saga Music, I'll actually just share this with you while I'm staring at this. This may be the place. Let's see, Saga Artists, Products, see if they have kits still. Instrument kits, yeah, so this is the company now that bought whatever company it was. Made mine. I don't see any banjo kits on here today. Oh, here we go. So it's banjos. But they do have pre-made banjos. So, yeah, this might be a good path to check out. These do not look like they are made of the aluminum, so I'll keep an eye out. But if you can find an older kit banjo, if somebody you might find them online under something like Stuart McDonald kit banjo, because they used to sell them, I think, pretty exclusively through the Stuart McDonald site. Stuart McDonald is a luthier site where you can buy strings and pins, instrument parts for instrument builders and maintainers. It's a good place to go anytime you're looking for that kind of stuff. Pulling up. Oh, okay. Let's see. Trying to get a little zoom on this particular pick. That might be an aluminum pot there. It's a little different than the one I learned on. But I would go that way. That's my one bit of advice that might be helpful, might not. Either way, wishing you some luck in that endeavor. I'm kind of reading while I'm talking here. So this does say standard 11-inch rim made of composite material and metallic gray. So it might not sound as good as the old aluminum ones, but that sounds like it would be very light, a composite material, metallic gray painted pot. So I'll keep an eye and ear out, and you might want to follow that path in an effort to help solve some of that problem. All right, Renee is officially confirmed. She's back in. I want to get up there to the UP at some point. Renee, up to your part of the world. I have a brother in Wisconsin, not too far away, down in Stevens Point, so still a few hours from UP, but not too far. So every time I'm up there, I think it's probably time to just head up. Right now might be a good time as we're all heat waving around here. Don't know how it's going up in the UP. Okay, let me get my screen off of there, and let's get to the next question that I already have in the hopper. And otherwise, if any of y'all have any banjo questions you want answered today, let's make it happen. Also, feel free to comment and follow-up question on any of this stuff. This one's from Toby, and this one could take us for a while. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to stop for a second and say Tony has contributed here and said the Saga OK2 kit 549 looks similar, and that's got to be it. I bet that's the recent iteration of what was originally the banjo that I learned on. I'm looking that up right now. I know y'all can't see my screen. There it is. Saga OK2 open back banjo kit. And that's on Amazon, this link I found. Yeah, that is the pot right there. Okay, I'm going to pull this back up. Before we get to Toby's question, Tony has done the work. So you see this pot here, this aluminum pot, which is, notice how there's no tone ring. It's just got this space around with the holes in that widened top of that pot. That's exactly the design of the banjo I learned on. That thing sounded great. It's on, if you listen to, I think you can go to my website, or even inside your Play Better Banjo, you should be able to listen to my live album from 2009, live at the chapel. And any of the banjo you hear on there, that is this Saga banjo. And trust me, it sounds great, and it always played great. We're not, it was never like the best build materials or anything, but it worked out really well. I do remember that mine had replacement tuners. So at the time, it was pretty decent materials, but the tuners really needed to be better. So that's something you could think about. So there it is. There's the kit. Now, obviously, you probably want to find one pre-made, but there's some intelligence to follow up on. This says currently unavailable from Amazon, so they might not be making these, but I bet you can find one live. Yeah, this is minus the slightly different head design and looks like a different material for the neck. This is definitely the banjo I grew up on. And then it had this little kind of bevel here where that part of the pot happened. Yeah, not too many changes in the 30-something years since the original. Okay, thanks a lot, Tony. Appreciate that. And Renee has a good point. She said, would a gourd banjo be lighter? Absolutely. And it hadn't even really crossed my mind. A gourd banjo is probably the lightest. It's probably going to be lighter even than that Saga. That is a really good point. You don't see a ton of gourd banjos with frets, but they certainly exist. It's not as common. And Beebs is saying thanks for the help. He's going to check this stuff out. But that's another thought, Beebs. Gourd banjo. Thanks, Renee. Yeah, see, it takes a village to answer these questions and help us all along. Before I get to Toby's question, which is really kind of a series of questions in a conversation, I'm going to recount our back and forth that we went through this week on email, because it's really, I think, important stuff to think about if you're not already in the habit of it. But before that, Renee's got a question. Is there a difference between a claw hammer and a bluegrass? I assume you're asking, is there a difference between a claw hammer and a bluegrass banjo? Yeah, I probably said something like that's a bluegrass banjo earlier when we were bopping around, right? It's just differences of general preference. So people who play claw hammer style tend to like to play the open back banjos, because bluegrass is really just a style of music, and it's a style of banjo playing. It's a 3-finger picking style with certain licks and conventions. So you could play bluegrass music on a open back banjo. You can play claw hammer banjo on a quote unquote bluegrass banjo. So if I did call something a bluegrass banjo earlier, I misspoke, because what I really meant was a resonator banjo, which is most commonly what you'd play like a bluegrass style on. So yeah, there are differences. Let's see. I'm sure if I just backed up here and just said 5-string banjo. All the banjos you see here on the top row, those all have a resonator on them, and that's more, it's the style you'll see more commonly. But that is definitely the style you'll usually see people playing bluegrass style on that type of banjo, and claw hammer or other old-time picking styles on a backless banjo. But it's mostly just about the nature of the sound that is emitted from the different designs. And that's the main design difference. Got a resonator that's basically designed to pop that sound back out. There's other differences you'll notice pretty quickly once you get used to playing one or the other. But it's really just a matter of preference, and it's good to understand the convention that most people who are playing a bluegrass style or a more modern 3-finger modern banjo style are usually going to use a resonator banjo. Sometimes people will interchange just bluegrass banjo, old-time banjo, meaning resonator banjo or an open back banjo. So good distinction to understand, and hopefully that made sense. Okay. Get that back off of there, and I will take you down this wonderful rabbit hole. So I loved everything about this conversation. Toby, long time Play Better Banjo member, contributor, etc. She was asking, okay, one advice on how to best approach this scenario. I'm playing with a group of people and we have a bunch of songs in C or D, and then we switch to 2 songs in B before switching back to songs in D. This is, if you play old-time banjo and use alternate tunings to play in different keys, this is a conundrum you already know about if you play with anybody else or if you've been to jams or whatnot. If you're in a band, this is something we always have to work with. And so this little adventure is very useful thought exercise for all of us. Okay, so in a group of people and they play a bunch of songs in the key of C and D, then they switch to a couple in B, then they go back to D. So what she's trying to figure out is a way to play in B with the least amount of tuning. And then she laid out what she thought her options were. This is what I loved about this. I do, any question in any form is welcome and encouraged at Play Better Banjo. But I do love when people ask a question and then if they have some notion of what the answer may be, I like when you go ahead and tell me what you're thinking. It gives me a lot of context to where you are, and as in this case, there's some ideas I wouldn't have necessarily thought of right away that Toby had already thought of on her own. So what I learned right away is she lists out her 4 options she had been exploring to try to solve this conundrum, and they were all really good options. It's basically, a lot of it is what I would have typed out had I not known she had already thought through this. I would have typed a lot of these ideas out. Because what do you do when you do these, especially in clawhammer and old-time banjo? We tend to use double C tuning. I like to use double C, sometimes open C. I'll use open G. I'll use my capo to get into different tunings. Sometimes I'll play in standard tuning, but play in multiple keys out of that. Sometimes I use an open D tuning. So that's not uncommon for old-time and or clawhammer banjo players. So you do get into these conundrums sometimes when you're just like, I don't know what's the best way to even just execute a particular tuning, much less get in and out of a tuning in a real-time situation, if you're performing in any capacity. On stage, it's really can be a little pain in the butt to try to switch in and out of tuning. So anytime you change your tuning in a drastic way or in a significant way, the banjo takes a second to adjust. So anyway, here are the options that Toby threw out there. Capo. So she said, she also said, I generally keep my banjo in double C tuning. So that's good to know. So if you're playing along at home, think about that. What would you do if you're generally in double C tuning, you're playing with a group, we're playing a bunch of songs in the key of C and D, and then you switch to B, and then you jump back to D. So my first thought is, double C tuning is great if you're playing a lot in C and D. That's great. because I can play my double C chord shapes and fret patterns and all that, and I'm good. Then I could capo up to the 2nd fret for the key of D and just raise my 5th string up. Now I'm in the key of D. That's a pretty quick fix. Obviously I could fine tune that a little more, but just putting it, if your banjo's set up decently, just putting a capo on the 2nd fret and retuning the 5th string. You fine tune for a second, but that's not a huge amount of fuss. That's very acceptable. You're good to go. So C and D, you're good in this one tuning. What do you do about B? I normally play, if I'm in the key of B, I normally play in the open G tuning. So let's start there. I would just go to open G tuning. Then you either tune your 5th string up to a B, if you can, on your instrument, or I usually just tune down to an F sharp here. I don't have a railroad spike on this one in order to kind of 5th string capo up. I could crank that up to a B or just down a half step to an F sharp. And just capo on the 4th fret, open G tuning, good to go. But that doesn't solve Toby's issue, which is that takes a bit of time. It takes a lot of trouble because the banjo needs to adjust all these new tensions in different places. And it does take some tuning, retuning, fine-tuning. And the capo also messes with the intonation a little bit. So there's a lot of adjustments that need to be made, and they're difficult to make quickly. And even if you're a professional and you've done it for years, like myself, this is something I have to do on stage all the time with my bands and with my duet project with Kelly. And even if you're really good and experienced at this and you have a great fancy professional banjo and all the environment is perfect, you can still end up with a little too much time spent trying to get your tuning right. So what are the options? Basically, I'll spoiler alert, basically it comes down to just finding the compromise that's going to work best for your situation. There's no perfect solution. So I would just, and I just tune to open G, capo up on the 4th. I take the time to do it. And sometimes it works out just fine. Sometimes it's a little bit of a pain. But luckily I've done it enough. It kind of works. So also having done it enough, if I'm on stage in any capacity, then either I'm talking while I do it or somebody else on stage is covering for me and kind of distracting and entertaining any listeners while I'm back there just twanging away at trying to get this darn banjo in tune. But let's think of some more practical ways. So Toby's first option was to capo on the 11th fret because she's in. She's in double C, right? So if she were to capo on the 11th fret, I can't do that with my capo. It won't fit around the neck down there. But if I had one of those clamp capos, right, I could capo on the 11th fret. And then, yeah, if I played in the C tuning, it would come out as the key of B. Now, without doing that even right now, you could probably guess the problem there is you're definitely going to get very little resonation. You have very little landscape and real estate to deal with. It's going to sound like a different instrument. It's going to sound more like a banjo ukulele or something, or like a banjarine or something. That could maybe work. You'd probably need a clamp style capo to do that. My capo wouldn't go all the way around my neck that far down. But that's less than ideal. It's not that you couldn't do that, but it's less than ideal. And most banjos, that's going to require a bit of tuning adjustment too if you get capo that far up to compensate for some of the offset of the string, distance from the fretboard and all that. Could be a little tricky, a little annoying. So not a bad idea though. And then this is my favorite, was her option 2, was to tune to double B. And this did not hit me right away as an option, and I don't know why, because this is how I want you all to be thinking all the time. If you need to navigate these situations, and if you like to use these different tunings as I do and as I teach, if you understand how they work behind the scenes, then you can problem solve with solutions like this. I like, this is my favorite of Toby's proposed solutions. and I think she's pursuing this right now, is the drop B. So you could take your double C tuning, drop it all a half step, all of the strings relatively, and now you're in double B. Right? So everything's still going to be the same. All your patterns will be the same. Your 1 chord will still be here. Your 4 chord will still be here. 5 chords still be here. But now they're coming out as a B. We've talked about this before in a few different scenarios, how just tuning, you're in standard pitch here, like tuning a half step low or a whole step low, or even a half step high, something like that. How you can kind of create a capo through your tuning system, or what I would call this a reverse capo, where we're giving ourselves that extra bit that we can't access here below the nut, because we're in our open position here, we're in double C. But if we just tune all the strings down a half step, and we play those same ideas, now we're in open B. I think this is the best solution. Let's see what that would look like. Let's see. I think I can pull this up. Give you a few ideas here. A little bit of context. Let me get do I have any truly blank pages left to share with you? I'll just have to erase. All right. Get rid of this stuff and let's think about what's going to happen if we tune down a half step. Hopefully you can do this in your head. If not, you want to write it out, and I'm going to write it out for you right now so you can kind of see what's happening, and I'm going to let you watch me tune my banjo down. So double C in standard tuning would be little G, big C, big G, big C. Right, that, right? So double B, we're just going to tune down a half step. So all of these just go down a half step. So if you know your musical alphabet, then you know what a half step below all these notes are. So hopefully you've already done that in your head or on paper, but I'll do it for you now. F sharp is a half step below G. B is a half step below C, F sharp again, B again, then a C sharp. So if you need to know those notes there, that is what you would tune to just lower everything down to double B. So let's do that. I think I can do this. See if I can make this happen. All right. I might be able to. There we go. Maybe you can kind of see both of those, but we have that F sharp. Yeah, actually that'll have to get out of the way. Away you go. Okay. We need an F sharp. We need our C, or our C needs to go down to a B. Our G to an F sharp. C to a B. And D to a C sharp. So we have a C sharp, a B, F sharp, B, and a F sharp. The problem with tuning banjos is I found that no matter how good the tuner is, this is the best tuner you can really get, these Peterson strobe tuners. They might be hard to look at, but the most precise tuners I've known. So even these fancy strobe tuners have a little trouble tuning a banjo. They can tune it maybe mathematically, read the frequencies and get it pretty much spot on, but it's like our ear wants to hear everything a little differently because of all the overtones that travel and mingle as they leave the banjo. You pretty much have to use a tuner and then tune a little bit by ear. So now if I'm tuned here down to a double B, I could play just as if I was in double C. And we're good. I don't really have to change tunings. I'll have to change my fifth string as I capo. But now, Toby can do this. This is what she's been doing. Capo on the first now for double C. So hopefully that makes sense. I lowered everything. So of course I capo on the first, then I tune this up to a G now because with that capo on the double B, it's now G, C, G, C, D. And then when it's time for D, you just capo on the second and tune the fifth string up to an A. So you see how that's probably the most elegant solution to this conundrum. What happens though is you notice I didn't spend a lot of time fine-tuning. Even with this solution, which I think is probably the best one for this scenario, still a lot of retuning just by putting a capo on an instrument. You're gonna have to retune it a little bit. Banjos especially love to be retuned. So you're always going to be doing some tuning. So that is the main point, is that it's always a bit of a compromise. You're always going to have to do tuning and fine tuning, and sometimes you're going to find yourself just a little out of tune once you start playing. At that point, sometimes I'll try to retune during a song. It's an advanced move. Try it at your own risk. Sometimes it makes you look cool when you get in tune while you're playing. Other times it sends you farther out of tune, and everybody knows that you are the fool that you know yourself to be, right? So I found that really interesting. There's plenty more to talk about here, but the main takeaway I thought was her solution of dropping down to double B. What are the cons there? The only real cons are it does change everything about your banjo when you change the where your tuning is. So if you lower it from standard pitch or raise it from standard A440 pitch, everything changes. The tension changes, the response changes, the resonation changes, the tone character as a result changes, and you might not like the result. My banjo feels a little soggy once I drop it down, and so that's what Toby's dealing with now, is trying to figure out, like, what can I do, because she doesn't like how hers sounds. When she double B's it and then capos up, she feels like it doesn't sound open enough. My guess is maybe it's missing some of that tension that it needs to resonate properly, or I don't know. So some suggestions there that we talked about were, I was suggesting you could use some thicker strings, which would hold more tension at the lower tension tunings, like a half step below standard. But it sounds like she's already using some pretty thick strings, about what I'm using on here, which is some kind of extra thick by most people's standards. So you wouldn't want to go beyond that and stress your instrument out too much. So the other thing to think about is if you have an adjustable tailpiece, unless you have a no-knot tailpiece, you usually have adjustments here. You can get your banjo key, crank that. Make sure you have good tension here, or experiment with the tension behind the bridge. That changes the overtones a little bit, changes the tightness or the looseness, for lack of better adjectives, to the sound and the resonation quality of your banjo. So you could experiment with that. Could also, if you're familiar at all with tightening and loosening your head, if you want to do some micro adjustments on your how tight or loose your head is, we're talking quarter turns around. you might be able to compensate for some of the stuff you're liking or not liking when you adjust all the tension on your banjo by lowering that tuning. So that's the con, is it does make your banjo feel a little differently and sound a little differently, but you might just like it there. If you have a similar situation, that's a really elegant solution. A couple other options she had, which I thought were great. Capo 6, 5th string, down to F sharp, and then play the B now is your 1 chord, and but you play it as the 4 chord shape. So this might sound confusing to just talk about. But if you think about it, I could capo up. Say normally I'm in regular tuning. This is a C. I could capo up to the 6th fret, and that would put me in E, which means my 4 chord now, or my 5 chord rather, is a B. And that's a chord I need for the key of B, right? My 1 chord in the key of E is an E. Well, that's my 4 chord in the key of B. So then I just need to find an F sharp, which you can just kind of take your 4 chord and just raise it up 2 frets. That might not make a ton of sense as I just describe it, but that was a good solution. So think about that. You could capo up and then start thinking about the primary chord shapes that you know. For example, in this example, in the double C tuning, we know our primary 1, 4, 5 chord shapes. So I could go to a different related key, like the key of E, that shares 2 of the chords that the key of B has in it, and I could use those, and now they just function differently numerically speaking. So now, that's where it gets confusing. We say, oh, the 1 chord's now the 4 or 5, etc. But if you kind of know where I'm heading with that and where Toby was heading with that, then that's something you could explore as well, something to think about. And then alternatively, you can go to the capo on the 4 and do some similar stuff. That's what I was messing around with a little bit right after I read the email. I thought that might have been a good solution. I ultimately found Toby's idea of just dropping the double B to be the best solution for this problem. The bottom line, though, and we wrote a lot back and forth. I had a lot to say, so I might read through some of that. But the bottom line is, there's a lot of compromise you have to make. In music in general, we're always kind of accommodating, and we're threading needles all the time and just trying to get the best scenario that we can, the best all-round scenario. But oftentimes, I'll learn a song and I can't sing it very well in the key of C or the key of D or anything like that, but I can play it really well in the double C tuning. Sometimes you gotta know when to hold them, know when to fold them. So oftentimes I'll say, well, I'm going to try it in a different tuning then, even though I don't like the sound on the banjo as well. I like how I can sing it in the key of C, let's say. So I'll have to make a decision. I could try to sing it in another key and not like my vocal experience as much, but love the banjo, or vice versa. Also, when you're playing with other people, there's a lot of those scenarios where you just have to kind of push and pull and give and take, and we don't always get it all the way we want, right? We can't always get it the way we want. So you get pretty good though at navigating these situations and figuring out what works, what doesn't work, what you can stand to lose, what you can gain from different scenarios. But I was really impressed with Toby's 4 options because it meant that she understood all the mechanics that were happening behind the scenes, and therefore she was able to make those decisions. Now, ultimately, she still wasn't super satisfied, needed to talk about it more. That's great too. Keep on keeping on and keep on seeking advice and perspective. But she made the bulk, 98% of her progress was made on her own because she understood how all this stuff works. And she was able to think through these 1, 4, 5 chords and the capoing and retuning the 5th string and how you could lower your standard tuning a half step to accommodate a low B and capo that up. That's stuff I always stress for you all and demonstrate for you over and over. And it's okay if some of it or none of it makes sense right now. These are things you want to strive towards understanding. That's the reason you want this musical theoretical understanding and not just the ability to play, right? Is you want to be able to, it's kind of a superpower to be able to understand this stuff as well, because then you kind of teach yourself. And that's really my goal as a teacher, is to render myself pretty obsolete, to where maybe you'll just ask me these questions like Toby has after she's kind of gone through all the steps already. And like, hey, is there something I'm missing? And I think that's exactly how she phrased it. So I kind of expressed all that. And then I gave some annoying answers. I gave a list of annoying answers, but I'll read them to you. Annoying answer number 1 to this problem, everybody's favorite, is get 2 banjos. And this is something I've done and other instrumentalists do sometimes in certain performance situations. Just have 2 instruments. A lot of fiddlers do it if they want to do cross tuning and standard tuning. Some banjo players do it as well. I've done it off and on through the years with various musical projects. Sometimes I've got a banjo tuned to open G, capo to a B. I've got a banjo tuned to double C or whatever. It makes it way easier, but of course now you're hauling around multiple instruments. Now you have to afford multiple instruments, etc. I think the cons are obvious on that one. The pros are more banjos. Nobody doesn't want more banjos. Annoying answer number 2 was just to practice getting in and out of these tunings and capo positions, just because experience does help mitigate the time and the effort and the annoyance of these situations, but it only mitigates it. You'll still have some struggles with this. I guess another option I didn't think of is get so successful that you have a banjo tech following you around, tuning and maintaining your banjo for you at all times. You can just hand it off to them. Obviously, not an option for probably any of us. Anyway, that was kind of a bit of advice, is like just work on tuning by ear, tuning with your tuner, tuning without your tuner. Maybe time yourself, see how quickly you can get in and out of these tunings. Pro tip there is that remember, whenever you are changing tunings, always tune your fifth string first. That has the most tension, and especially if that has a significant change to it, it's going to really throw off all the relative tension. So if you tune your first 4 strings, then you tune your fifth string down a whole step, up a whole step, it's going to throw all the others pretty far out, and you'll have to retune them again. So you might as well start with your fifth string, then tune the rest, then fine tune as needed. Annoying answer number 3. Not such an annoying answer here. This is another real life consideration here, is I wasn't sure of the context. Perhaps they're in the key of B because there's a singer who really prefers to sing the song in the key of B. Or maybe there's an instrumentalist, maybe there's a concertina player who's like, my concertina is in the key of B, this is how we're doing it. So there can be situations where you're going to have to adhere to a certain key in a group. There can also be situations where if somebody's in B because they like to sing it there, can they sing it in C? Is that so bad for them? Maybe they'll project better, which might be good for live settings. Or it might be that it just doesn't feel right, or they have trouble hitting the notes or whatever. That does happen all the time. 1 half-step key change can be a big difference. You notice it on your banjo when you retune. You notice it when you're a singer as well. Especially if you're more of a vernacular folk-style singer like most of us, you definitely notice it's not that easy to switch between keys, even if they're a half-step apart. So those were my answers, was those 3, and then that was about it. Then we talked a little bit about making some adjustments to accommodate the kind of cons to lowering your string tension. Hopefully that made sense. I know that was a long journey, and that's kind of why I saved it for the end. But I thought there's so many gems in there and so many things to unpack and think about, and hopefully that got your wheels turning or some light bulbs lighting. At the very least, that might have introduced you to some of these concepts that you might want to put on your list of things to learn and understand down the road. If you're not understanding half the stuff, that's fine. You just stick with it and it'll make more and more sense. All right. Tony was saying could you tune double C to capo on the 2nd fret and then remove for B tuning on open strings? Said, sorry, I meant first fret, but now I see that's what you are doing. Okay, so Tony was ahead of the game there as well, so he figured out where we were heading there. So y'all are smart, sharp as whips out there. Yeah, so Tony was talking in the chat. I hadn't noticed it till late, but he was kind of on that game as well. He thought, oh, you could tune to B and then capo first for the key of C, capo third for the key of D. Again, I think that's the best solution to that right there. So, all right, good stuff. Probably gonna move on. We've hit our hour mark. But if anybody has any final comments or quick questions, I will try to get to them. But otherwise, I think it's about time to sign off. This has been fun. Like I said, if you're watching this in real time, I'll try to get at you live tomorrow for that live lesson. Otherwise, I will get you a live lesson on Thursday or a pre-recorded lesson on Wednesday night or Thursday. You're going to get something. Going to get something from me. So stand by for that. In the meantime, make some noise and send your questions my way. Be back at you